The air inside the Varkari arena was heavy and tense, as if the whole place was holding its breath. The structure itself was huge, built from black stone and lit by hundreds of floating fire orbs that cast a strange silver glow around the circular floor. The seats rose high like the walls of a fortress, packed with alien spectators from every corner of the empire. Their voices were low murmurs, a mix of curiosity and mockery. They weren't here for a fight of blades or guns. No, today was something stranger. Today was the trial of desire. In the very center of the arena stood a human Manathan Cole. His boots felt too light for the solid stone beneath him, and the roar of the alien crowd was a sound he could feel in his chest. He had been a prisoner of the Varkari Empire for nearly 6 months, dragged across star systems, forced to work in their strongholds. He had seen strange creatures, harsher worlds, and 1,000 different ways to die, and yet none of those things had unsettled him the way the figure in front of him did. Her name was Kyra. The Varkari called her the Silver Blade, a warrior with more victories than anyone her age. She was tall, at least a head taller than Ethan, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of her people's honor. Her skin had a faint metallic sheen, almost like moonlight captured in flesh. Her eyes were silver too, sharp and unblinking, like the edge of a sword that could cut through lies. Kyra wasn't just a soldier. She was a living legend among her kind, and now she was his judge. This will not be a contest of strength. Kyra's voice rang out, deep and controlled, carrying easily over the restless crowd. This is a trial of truth. The trial of desire. Ethan swallowed hard. The translator chip in his ear hummed, turning her alien words into smooth English. But the weight of them didn't need translation. Kyra took one slow step closer, her armor making a low metallic sound. "You will tell me," she continued, "what you desire most in this galaxy. Not what you think I wish to hear. Not what would save your life. Your truth." The crowd stirred, some leaning forward in anticipation, others already shaking their heads. They'd seen this before. Most outsiders asked for riches, ships, weapons, or freedom. That was the safe path. But Ethan's chest tightened. He thought of the months since they had first met, though met was too gentle a word for the way she had found him. He had been half-starved, hunted through the wilds of Karuan when Kyra appeared. She hadn't killed him, though she could have. Instead, she had dragged him back to the Varkari camp, fed him, and barked orders in a voice that was somehow both terrifying and reassuring. She had taught him the way of her people, not with patience, but with a relentless expectation that he could keep up. Somewhere between those sharp commands and the rare moments of quiet, something had changed inside him. He had started noticing the way her eyes softened when she saw wounded soldiers, the way she stood like an unmovable wall between danger and those under her protection, the way she never boasted about her victories, as if glory meant nothing compared to loyalty. And now she stood before him, asking for the truth of his heart. His pulse pounded in his ears. He could take the safe way out, say freedom, say a ship home, say anything that would end this without making him a fool in front of thousands. But when her gaze locked with his, the truth burned too bright to hide. He took a slow breath, his voice low but steady. "My desire." The crowd leaned forward. Kyra didn't move. "Is you?" For a heartbeat, the arena went silent. No one moved, no one breathed. Then, as if the stillness had shattered, the audience erupted into shocked voices. Some laughed, sharp and mocking. Others hissed in disbelief. No human had ever dared to speak such words to a Varkari warrior, let alone to her. Kyra didn't smile. She didn't scowl. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes had changed. She took a step toward him. The arena was still buzzing with disbelief. The alien crowd's voices rolled like a storm, a mix of laughter, outrage, and whispered speculation. Yet Ethan barely noticed them. His focus was locked entirely on Kyra. She stood only a few paces away, tall and unmoving, the faint light from the floating fire orbs tracing the sharp lines of her silver armor. The metal seemed to catch the glow and throw it back, as if it refused to let darkness touch her. Her gaze was fixed on him, steady, sharp, and impossible to read. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, but each word landed with weight. "Do you understand what you have just said, human?" The translator chip hummed in Ethan's ear, but he could feel the meaning even without the words. This wasn't a question of language, it was a question of consequence. He swallowed hard, but he didn't look away. "Yes, I understand." The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, and Kyra's silver eyes narrowed slightly. She began to walk toward him, slow and deliberate, her boots clicking softly on the stone floor. The sound echoed in the vast arena, somehow louder than the shouting voices above. When she stopped in front of him, she was close enough that Ethan could see the fine etchings carved into her armor. Each mark told a story: battles fought, enemies defeated, oaths taken. The air around her carried the faint scent of scorched metal and the wild, clean smell of Karuan's mountains. "You could have asked for freedom," she said, her tone low and even. "You could have asked for wealth, for safety, for a ship to take you far from here. Yet you speak my name as your desire. Do you know what such words mean in my people's law?" Ethan hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. "It means I've spoken a binding truth. It means I've put my life in your hands." Kyra's eyes searched his face, as if she was trying to find even the smallest flicker of a lie. "You risk everything," she murmured. "For what?" Ethan felt his chest tighten. His mind flashed back to moments he hadn't been able to forget. The time she stood over him in the rain after a battle, her blade dripping with alien blood as she shielded him from another blow. The time she handed him a piece of bread when she thought no one was watching. The rare sound of her voice when she wasn't giving orders, low and thoughtful, almost soft. "For you," he said simply. "Not because I want to own you, or win you, or anything like that. Because I've seen you. The way you fight, the way you protect your people, the way you never back down. You've carried me through more than I deserved to survive, and I—" His voice caught for just a second. "I can't want anything else." The crowd had gone strangely quiet now. Even the ones who had left were leaning forward, their curiosity hooked on the tension in the air. Kyra tilted her head, studying him like he was some strange weapon she hadn't yet decided to use or destroy. Her hand shifted slightly on the hilt of her sword, not a threat, but a reminder of who she was. "Humans are strange," she said at last. "You live such short lives, and yet you gamble them so easily." Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe that's why we speak the truth when it matters. We don't have time to waste on lies." For the first time since the trial began, Kyra's expression shifted. Not much, just the slightest softening around her eyes, a tiny crack in the armor she wore inside as well as out. The arena lights flickered as the fire orbs shifted above them, casting long shadows across the floor. The silence was deep now, waiting for her next words. She didn't give them right away. Instead, she turned her head, glancing briefly toward the high seats where the Varkari War Council sat. Her gaze lingered there for a heartbeat, then returned to Ethan. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, but no less steady. "Your truth has been spoken, human. We will see if it survives what comes next." She stepped back, her silver cloak sweeping the floor, and gestured for the trial to continue. Ethan let out a slow breath. He didn't know what next meant, but he knew one thing: he had said what he needed to say, and whatever came, he wouldn't regret it. For a few long moments, the arena felt like it had stopped breathing. Ethan stood in the center, still feeling the weight of Kyra's silver gaze. The crowd's voices had faded to a tense quiet, broken only by the distant crackle of the floating fire orbs. Everyone was waiting to see what she would do. High in the viewing stands, The Varkari War Council sat in carved stone thrones, their faces hidden in shadow. Ethan could feel their judgment pressing down on him even without seeing their eyes. A single word from them could end his life, but they remained still, letting Kyra decide. She didn't rush her answer. She circled him slowly, her boots clicking against the polished stone floor, her armor whispering as she moved. Every step was measured, like a predator testing the strength of its prey. "Do you know," she said at last, her voice low but carrying through the silence, "that the trial of desire has been held for centuries, and never has a human spoken the name of a Varkari warrior as their wish." Ethan kept his eyes on her as she moved. "Then I suppose I'm the first." That earned a few sharp laughs from the crowd, but Kira's face remained unreadable. "Perhaps you think that makes you brave," she said. "But it makes you something else exposed." She stopped in front of him again, close enough that he could see the faint scar across her cheek, a thin line that cut through the metallic sheen of her skin. "When you speak my name in this place, you declare yourself in front of my people. You bind yourself to me not as an equal, not as a friend, but as one who seeks what cannot easily be given." Ethan's pulse was steady now. "I didn't speak to win a prize," he said. "I spoke because it's true, that's all." The silence between them stretched. Somewhere in the seats above, an elder Varkari shifted in their chair, the sound of their armor scraping against stone echoing faintly. Kyra's eyes narrowed. "You risk your life for a truth no one asked you to share. Why?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because if I stay silent, nothing changes. If I speak, at least I know I didn't waste the chance." Her silver gaze searched his face again, as if looking for the smallest crack, the smallest sign of fear or falsehood. If she found it, she said nothing. Then, without warning, she drew her sword. The crowd gasped, the sound rippling through the arena like a wave. The blade was long and curved, made of some strange metal that shimmered with an inner light. She held it loosely at her side, but its presence was enough to make Ethan's heart pound. "Understand this," Kyra said, her voice as sharp as the weapon she held. "In Varkari law, if I believe your desire is false, I may end you here, and the council will not stop me. If I believe your desire is true, I am bound to answer it, in my way." Ethan met her eyes, then decide. The words seemed to hang in the air between them. Somewhere in the crowd, someone let out a low, approving growl. Kyra didn't move for a long moment. Then she slid her sword back into its sheath with a smooth motion. The sound of metal on metal was crisp and final. "Speak as one without fear," she said. "But fear is not the enemy of truth. Lies are, and so far." She let her words trail off, but the meaning was clear. She had not found his truth wanting yet. She turned sharply, her cloak sweeping across the floor as she addressed the War Council. "The human's words will stand. The trial continues." The crowd erupted again, half in outrage, half in awe. Ethan stood where he was, trying not to let his knees weaken. He had survived another step, but as Kyra glanced back at him, there was something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Not anger, not mockery. Something almost like curiosity. It was a small thing, but it was enough to give him hope. The arena's noise had begun to fade again, as if the crowd itself sensed the air growing heavier. Kyra stood at the center, her back straight, her chin lifted, her silver eyes fixed on Ethan. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she removed one heavy gauntlet from her hand, the dark metal catching the light, before she set it down on the stone floor with a solid clang. The sound carried in the silence, sharp and final. Ethan's gaze stayed on her, but his mind was racing. In the Varkari culture, every movement, every gesture in the trial of desire meant something. Removing armor was never casual, it was an opening, a sign that the trial was shifting from public spectacle to personal test. Kyra took one slow step toward him, the sound of her boots echoing in the huge arena. "You have seen me only as a warrior," she said, her voice deep and steady. but you do not know the weight I carry." Her words seemed aimed only at him, though thousands were listening. "I was trained for war from the moment I could stand," she continued. "Every scar on my armor is from a battle where someone else did not return. Every mark is a life taken, a life spared, or an oath kept. I have led soldiers into storms of fire. I have watched friends fall in the dust, and still, I stand." She stopped a step away from him now. Ethan could see her face more clearly, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. Not from age, but from years of squinting against smoke, grit, and pain. "I swore to my people," she said quietly, "that I would belong to no one. That my blade and my life would serve only the Varkari." Ethan's chest tightened. He had guessed she lived with strict vows, but hearing them aloud was different. It wasn't just honor she carried, it was a chain she had chosen for herself. "Do you understand?" she asked, her gaze locked on his. "That to name me as your desire is to step into that chain. That it would bind you to my battles, my enemies, my burdens." "I understand," Ethan said softly. Her silver eyes searched him again, but there was no anger, now only something deeper. "You risk dishonor before my people," she said, "and death, if you fail to live by what you claim." Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Then I'd better not fail." A faint breath escaped her, almost a laugh, but not quite. It was gone in a heartbeat. The crowd was utterly silent now. Even the fire orbs seemed to burn more still, their light steady and unmoving. Kyra stepped even closer, close enough that Ethan could see the faint shimmer of heat radiating from her armor. Her voice dropped to something only he could hear. "You speak as though you are ready, but words are nothing without the will to stand when the storm comes. If I accept your desire, you will face trials beyond this arena. Then, let me face them," Ethan said, without hesitation. For the first time, her expression softened, not much, but enough that the hardness in her features eased. "You remind me," she said slowly, "of a soldier I once knew. He was not Varkari. He was small, like you. But he had a heart that never bent. He did not survive the war, but he is remembered in my people's songs." Ethan swallowed, not sure if she meant it as a warning or a promise. Kyra straightened again, her voice rising so the whole arena could hear. "The human has spoken truth. I have tested his resolve, and he has not turned away. But this trial is not yet over. There is still one choice to make, mine." She turned to face the war council. "He has spoken my name. Now I must decide whether I will answer it." The council members leaned forward, their faces shadowed but their attention sharp. The arena seemed to hold its breath. Kyra looked back at Ethan one last time, and for a brief second, her eyes were not those of a commander or a judge, they were simply eyes that saw him, and him alone. "If you want, I can make part 5 the moment where she begins the symbolic act of removing her armor, piece by piece, signaling acceptance, and the crowd reacts in shock. That will push the emotional payoff toward the peak." The fire orbs above burned brighter, casting long silver shadows across the arena floor. Every alien in the crowd was leaning forward now, their voices hushed, waiting for Kyra's decision. Ethan stood still, his hands loose at his sides. Though his heart was pounding so hard, he could feel it in his throat. This was the moment. If she refused him now, the council would see his truth as weakness, and the trial would end in humiliation or worse. Kara turned away from him, facing the war council. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, like the first roll of thunder before a storm. "The human has spoken his desire," she announced. "It is not for gold, nor ships, nor freedom. His desire is me." The crowd erupted. Some shouted in outrage, others laughed in disbelief, and a few let out sharp guttural cries of approval. Ethan felt the sound rumble through his bones. Kyra raised a hand, and the noise slowly died down. She stood tall, the light glinting off her armor, her silver eyes scanning the faces of her people. Then, slowly, deliberately, she reached up and unclasped the first plate of her shoulder armor. The heavy piece of metal fell into her hand, and she let it drop to the stone floor with a loud, echoing clang. The crowd gasped. In Varkari culture, armor was not simply protection, it was identity. Removing it in front of someone was not surrender, but acceptance. It meant, I stand before you without the shield of war. Kyra's movements were slow, each one measured. She removed the matching plate from her other shoulder and let it fall. The sound rang out like a drumbeat. Ethan's chest tightened. He had seen her fight, seen her stand in battle like a wall of steel. Now, piece by piece, she was taking that steel away. She unclasped the arm guards, the chest plate, the hip plates, each falling to the ground with its own solid note. The arena floor beneath her feet became littered with the scars and symbols of her victories. When the last plate hit the stone, she stood in the lighter combat garments worn beneath, made of dark, flexible material that clung close to her form. She was still armed, still dangerous, but she was no longer the armored figure the galaxy feared. She turned back to Ethan, stepping toward him until they were only a breath apart. Her voice, when she spoke, carried to every corner of the arena. You do not yet understand what this means, she said. By removing my armor before you, I declare that your truth has reached me. I accept that you have spoken from your heart. The crowd roared again, this time a mix of shock and something else. Something like awe. But hear this, human, she continued, her gaze piercing into his. This acceptance is not a gift freely given. It is a bond. From this moment forward, you walk the same path as I. You will share my battles, my enemies, my honor, and should you ever falter, it will be my hand that ends you. Ethan didn't flinch. Then I'll walk that path. For the briefest moment, her lips curved not quite a smile, but something close. We shall see if you can keep pace. She lifted her right hand and placed it flat against his chest, over his heart. The gesture was not soft, was firm, strong, a warrior's touch. Your life is now bound to mine. We stand together in the eyes of my people. The crowd began to chant her name. Kaida, 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 their voices thundering against the high stone walls. Ethan could barely hear himself think, but it didn't matter. All he could feel was the heat of her hand and the weight of the moment. In that instant, it didn't matter that they came from different worlds, different species, different wars. She had chosen not to turn away, and for Ethan, that was enough. The crowd's chanting slowly faded, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. Kyra's hand remained on Ethan's chest, her silver eyes locked onto his, as if measuring every breath he took. This bond, she began, her voice deep and clear, is not born from comfort or desire alone. It is forged in duty. In my people's law, when a warrior accepts such a truth, they do not take it lightly. They do not walk away when it becomes inconvenient. They stand until their last breath. Her words rolled through the arena like waves. No one moved, no one spoke. Even the council leaned forward slightly, as if the moment demanded their witness. Ethan didn't blink. Then I will stand, he said quietly. Kyra tilted her head, studying him. You say that now, but you have not yet felt the weight of it. You will be bound to my battles. You will fight enemies you do not understand. You will see blood on your hands, and you will carry the names of the fallen in your heart. And when the choice comes to protect yourself or stand beside me, you must choose me. Every time. Her words weren't a warning, they were a challenge. I've already made that choice, Ethan replied, his voice steady. When I spoke your name, I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew it would be dangerous, and I knew it was worth it. Something flickered in her eyes, then something rare, almost like respect. Kyra dropped her hand from his chest, but she didn't step back. Instead, she removed the blade from her side and held it flat between them, the edge catching the firelight. In the Varkari way, she said, a bond such as this is sealed with a vow, spoken before witnesses. Once spoken, it cannot be broken without dishonor so deep that even death will not erase it. Ethan swallowed, but he didn't hesitate. Then speak it. She lifted her chin, her voice rising so all could hear. I, Kyra of the Silver Blade, vow to stand beside this human Athen in battle, and in life. I will guard his back as he guards mine. His enemies will be mine, and his path will be shared with mine. Until the last breath leaves my body, I will not abandon him. The words rang out across the arena like the toll of a great bell. The crowd responded with a deep, resonant hum, the sound of thousands acknowledging the vow. Kyra then turned. The blade, so the hilt faced Ethan. Now you speak. Ethan reached for the hilt, feeling the cool metal under his fingers. He took a breath, letting the weight of the moment fill him. I, Ethan Cole, vow to stand beside Kyra of the Silver Blade. I will fight with her, bleed with her, and face whatever comes without turning away. Her honor will be mine to protect, and her enemies mine to face. Until my last breath, I will not abandon her. The crowd roared not with mockery this time, but with approval. It was a sound that felt like the arena itself was alive. Kyra took the blade back, slid it into its sheath, and gave a single, sharp nod. It is done. For a moment, the world seemed smaller. The vast arena, the countless eyes watching, the council's looming presence, all of it faded to just the two of them standing in the circle of light. You are mine now, Kyra said softly, so only he could hear. And I am yours, not as possession, not as prize, but as bond. Ethan felt the truth of it settle inside him like something solid, unshakable. Then we walk forward together, her lips curved, just a fraction into something that might have been the beginning of a smile. We do. The fire orbs above flared, and the crowd's chants returned, louder than before. The trial was over, but the journey had just begun. The arena was empty now. The fire orbs had dimmed, casting long shadows across the stone floor. The roar of the crowd was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of the wind through the open gates. Ethan stood where the vow had been spoken, his boots still dusty from the trial. His chest rose and fell slowly, the weight of what had just happened pressing on him not like a burden, but like a crown he had never expected to wear. Kyra was beside him, silent. Her silver eyes scanned the space one last time, as if searching for invisible threats. She moved like a predator, even in stillness, controlled, precise, but no longer holding the same hard distance from him. You should rest, she said finally, her voice low. Ethan shook his head. I'm not tired. She glanced at him, one brow lifting. Then you do not yet understand what it means to stand in my shadow. He smiled faintly. Maybe I don't want to stand in your shadow. Maybe I want to walk beside you. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment before she turned and began walking toward the gate. Then keep up, human, he followed. The great stone gates creaked as they opened, revealing the night beyond. The twin moons hung in the sky, their light turning the ground silver. Far away, the city lights shimmered like fallen stars, and the cold air carried the scent of metal and dust. As they stepped into the night, the streets were quiet. A few alien citizens peeked from behind windows and doorways, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Word of the vow had already spread. It was written in their faces. They passed a small market square, where a cluster of young Varkari warriors stood. They stared at Ethan, their eyes sharp, but none spoke. Kyra's presence was enough to hold them still. She didn't even look at them, she kept walking, each step calm and certain. Ethan noticed the way the warriors' gazes shifted between them, as if trying to understand how a human could walk beside their champion without chains. After a while, the city walls rose ahead, and they climbed a narrow path that led to a watchtower. From here, the desert stretched endlessly, the sand glowing under the moonlight. The silence was almost sacred. Kyra stopped near the edge, her cloak shifting in the wind. Beyond that horizon, she said quietly, there are places where even my people do not go. Enemies that breathe darkness. Wars that have not yet touched this city. That is where I walk. That is where you will walk with me. Ethan stepped up beside her, looking out over the endless land. Then that's where I'll go. She studied him in the moonlight. You don't know the cost yet. One day you might, and you might hate me for it. He met her eyes. If that day comes, I'll tell you to your face, but I won't leave. For a long moment, they simply stood there. The wind wrapped around them, carrying the cold scent of far-off storms. Finally, Kyra drew a small blade from her belt knot, her main weapon, but one carved with strange, flowing symbols. She turned it in her hands, then offered it to him. This, she said, is not for battle. It is for memory. In my culture, when someone gives you a blade like this, they are saying, I will cut away the world for you, if I must. Ethan took it, the metal warm from her touch. Then I'll keep it with me. Always. Something softened in her expression. It wasn't a smile, not yet, but it was the closest he'd seen. Good. You will need it. They stood in silence a while, longer, until Kyra finally turned away from the horizon. Come tomorrow, we prepare for the first journey. Ethan followed, but this time their steps matched two sets of footprints, side by side. No chains, no distance. As they walked down from the tower, the moons dipped lower, and the city's streets began to glow faintly with the light of the coming dawn. It wasn't just a new date, was the beginning of something unbroken, something forged in fire and choice. Ethan knew whatever came next would not be easy. There would be battles. There would be pain. But for the first time since he had been taken from Earth, he didn't feel lost. Because now, he wasn't walking alone,